The transport shuttle shuddered as it docked with Nexus Station. Katie Morrison pressed her face against the small window and stared at the massive research facility floating in the void. Metal corridors stretched out like spider legs from the central hub, and bright lights flickered behind hundreds of windows. This would be her home for the next 2 years. Katie grabbed her single duffel bag and made her way to the airlock. The doors hissed open, and she stepped into a world unlike anything she had ever seen. The corridor walls were covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. The air smelled different too, like ozone mixed with something she could not name. A tall figure approached her. Commander Veltar stood nearly 7 feet high, with gray skin that looked like stone and 4 arms that moved with precise control. His large black eyes studied Katie with obvious disappointment. "So you are the new human," Veltar said in perfect English, though his voice carried a musical quality that made each word sound like a song. "Lieutenant Katie Morrison, fresh from your defense academy." "Yes, sir," Katie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She had practiced this moment dozens of times during the long journey here. Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter, but not the kind that meant anything was funny. "Another human sent to study specimen X7. How long do you think you will last?" The previous 3 requested transfers within a week. Katie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I plan to complete my full assignment, sir." "We shall see." Veltar turned and began walking down the corridor. His 4 arms moved in a rhythm that reminded Katie of a dancer. "Follow me, I will show you to your quarters and introduce you to the research team." They walked through corridors filled with beings Katie had only seen in textbooks. A group of insect-like creatures with golden shells clicked past them, speaking in rapid bursts of sound. A massive blue creature with tentacles instead of arms was examining a wall display, its skin changing colors as it worked. Nexus Station houses over 200 researchers from 47 different species, Veltar explained without looking back. "We study the most dangerous life forms in this sector of space. It requires intelligence, courage, and experience." The message was clear. Katie had none of those things, at least not in Veltar's opinion. They entered a lift that moved sideways, instead of up and down. Through the transparent walls, Katie could see into laboratories where strange experiments were taking place. In one room, a team of scientists in protective suits were working with what looked like living fire. In another, crystalline beings were examining samples that floated in midair. "Your quarters," Veltar announced as they stopped at a door marked with human symbols. The room beyond was small but clean, with a bed, desk, and personal waste facility. A window looked out at the stars. "The research lab is on level 5, Veltar continued. "You will meet Dr. Crixon tomorrow morning at 800 hours. He leads the xenobiology team." Katie set down her bag and turned to face the commander. "Sir, could you tell me more about specimen X7? Veltar's 4 arms went still. His black eyes seemed to grow even darker. "You will learn what you need to know tomorrow, but I will give you one piece of advice, Lieutenant Morrison. Do not let curiosity override common sense. 3 research teams have already paid the price for underestimating what we keep in containment." After Veltar left, Katie unpacked her few belongings and tried to settle in. The bed was harder than she was used to, and strange sounds echoed through the walls. She could hear conversations in languages that sounded like music, machinery humming with unfamiliar rhythms, and occasionally something that might have been laughter. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of shadowy creatures and glowing eyes. The next morning, Katie found her way to level 5. The research laboratory was larger than her entire apartment back on Earth. Equipment she did not recognize lined the walls, and holographic displays showed data in symbols from dozens of different languages. Dr. Crixon was waiting for her. The helix scientist looked like a cross between a spider and a tree, with long, thin limbs that branched into smaller appendages. His skin was bark-like and covered in small leaves that rustled when he moved. "Ah, the new human," Dr. Crixon said. His voice came from somewhere inside his chest and sounded like wind through branches. "I suppose you think you can succeed where others have failed." "I hope to learn from their mistakes," Katie replied carefully. Dr. Crixon made a rustling sound that might have been amusement. Spoken like a true rookie. Very well, let me show you what you are dealing with. He led her to a secure section of the lab where a massive display screen showed surveillance footage. Katie watched as the screen came to life, revealing a containment cell unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of transparent metal, and energy barriers created a cage within a cage, and inside that cage was a nightmare. The creature stood 8 feet tall, on powerful legs that ended in claws the size of dinner plates. Its body was covered in black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 6 arms moved with deadly grace, each ending in hands that could tear through steel, but it was the eyes that made Katie's breath catch in her throat. Multiple sensory organs glowed with purple light, tracking movement with predatory intelligence. Specimen X7, Dr. Crixon announced, also known as a void stalker. The deadliest predator we have ever encountered. It killed 17 beings during its capture, and has been responsible for the deaths of 6 researchers since arriving here. Katie watched the creature pace back and forth in its cage. Every movement spoke of barely contained violence, of a killer waiting for the chance to strike. What do we know about its behavior patterns? Katie asked. Dr. Crixon's leaves rustled with what might have been surprise. Behavior patterns? It has one behavior, Lieutenant. It kills everything that comes near it. The previous teams learned that lesson the hard way. But Katie continued to watch the screen, and something about the creature's movements caught her attention. The pacing was not random. There was a pattern to it, a rhythm that reminded her of something she could not quite identify. I would like to review all the research data, Katie said quietly. By all means, Dr. Crixon replied. Though I doubt you will find anything we have missed. Some creatures exist only to destroy. Specimen X7 is pure predator, nothing more. Katie nodded, but as she watched the creature move through its deadly dance, she found herself wondering if that was really true. Katie spent her first week reading every file, watching every video, and studying every piece of data about Specimen X7. The reports painted a picture of pure violence. The creature had killed its captors during transport. It had attacked every researcher who came near its cage. It had even destroyed monitoring equipment that got too close, but the more Katie studied, the more questions she had. The attacks were not random. Each one happened when the researchers tried to use pain devices or fear tactics. When they shot it with stun weapons or tried to drug its food, the creature became deadly. But in the quiet moments between these encounters, the surveillance footage showed something different. The creature moved in patterns. It touched certain spots on the walls at regular times. Sometimes it would sit in what looked like meditation poses. Other times it would make soft sounds that the audio equipment barely picked up. You are wasting your time, Dr. Crixon told her on the 7th day. His leaves rustled with impatience as he watched Katie review the same footage again. 3. Teams of experienced researchers have studied this beast. They all reached the same conclusion. What if they were wrong? Katie asked, not looking away from the screen. Wrong? Dr. Crixon's branches shook. Lieutenant Morrison, these were not rookies. Dr. Zethal had 40 years of experience with dangerous species. Commander Nixra had captured over 100 predators for study. They knew what they were dealing with. Katie paused the video and pointed at the screen. But look at this. Every time the creature attacks, it happens right after someone tries to hurt it first. What if it is not attacking? What if it is protecting itself? Protecting itself. Dr. Crixon made a sound like wind through dry leaves. It is a void stalker. They are born killers. They hunt entire species to extinction just for sport. Says, who? Katie challenged. Where did that information come from? Dr. Crixon went very still. His leaves stopped rustling completely. It is common knowledge. But who studied them first? Who made that determination? Katie turned to face him. Every report I have read just repeats the same claims. No one seems to have actually observed their natural behavior. For a long moment, Dr. Crixon said nothing. Then his leaves began rustling again, but softer this time. You are suggesting that centuries of scientific understanding might be wrong? I'm suggesting that maybe we should ask questions instead of making assumptions. The next morning, Katie made a decision that terrified and excited her in equal measure. She was going to meet Specimen X7 face to face. Security Chief Yulvan tried to stop her at the containment level entrance. The Ketmori warrior stood nearly as tall as Commander Veltar, but where the commander looked like living stone, Yulvan looked like he was made from steel and scars. His reptilian face showed no emotion, but his hand rested on the weapon at his side. No one goes near the creature without full protective gear and armed escort, Yulvan said in a voice like grinding metal. I just want to observe, Katie explained. I will stay outside the containment barriers. The last researcher who tried that approach is now dead, Yulvan replied. The creature threw pieces of the cell wall hard enough to crack the outer barrier. Katie nodded. I read the report, but that researcher was using sonic torture devices to try to force a response. I am not planning to hurt it. Yulvan studied her with eyes like yellow glass. You are either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both, Katie admitted. After what felt like hours of safety briefings and equipment checks, Katie finally stood outside the maximum security containment cell. The creature was even more impressive in person than it had been on the screen. 8 feet of pure predator, covered in armor that seemed to drink in the light around it. Its multiple eyes tracked her movement as she approached the outer barrier. Katie ignored the fear that made her hands shake. She walked slowly to the transparent wall and sat down on the floor. The creature stopped pacing and stared at her. For several long minutes, neither of them moved. Then Katie did something that no previous researcher had tried. She closed her eyes and simply listened. The containment cell was not silent. Air recyclers hummed. Energy barriers buzzed with power. But underneath those mechanical sounds, Katie could hear something else. The creature was making noise. Not the growls or snarls she expected, but something almost musical. A pattern of low notes that rose and fell like a song. When Katie opened her eyes, the creature was sitting too. Not in an attack position, but mirror to her posture. Its glowing eyes watched her with what looked like curiosity instead of hunger. Hello, Katie said softly. The creature tilted its head. The musical sound stopped. Katie tried again, this time humming a simple tune, something her mother used to sing when Katie was small. The creature went very still, its multiple eyes focusing on her with new intensity. When she finished the tune, the creature made its musical sounds again. But this time the pattern was different. It almost sounded like it was trying to copy her melody. Katie felt her heart racing, but not from fear. She was right. The creature was not just a mindless killer. It was trying to communicate. Over the next few days, Katie established a routine. She would arrive at the containment level each morning and sit outside the barrier. She would hum simple melodies, and the creature would respond with its own musical patterns. Slowly, they began to build a basic form of communication. The creature seemed to understand that she was not a threat. When maintenance crews worked near the cell, it would become agitated, pacing and making harsh warning sounds. But when Katie arrived, it would calm down and return to their musical exchanges. On the 5th day, something unexpected happened. Katie had been working late and arrived at the containment level after her usual time. She found the creature sitting, in the same position as always, but it was not making its usual sounds. Instead, it was quiet, as if waiting. When Katie sat down and began to hum, the creature responded immediately. But this time, instead of creating its own pattern, it hummed along with her tune. The harmony was perfect, as if they had practiced together for years. Katie stopped humming, too amazed to continue. The creature kept going, finishing the melody on its own. When it was done, it made a new sound, something Katie had never heard before. It was almost like laughter, but gentle and warm. You are not a monster, are you? Katie whispered. The creature moved closer to the barrier. One of its massive hands pressed against the transparent wall, directly across from where Katie was sitting. She could see her reflection in its dark armor, small and fragile next to this powerful being, but she was not afraid anymore. Something in those glowing eyes told her that she was safe. More than safe. She was protected. Katie pressed her own hand against the barrier, matching the creature's gesture. Through the transparent wall, predator and human made contact for the first time. That night, Katie documented everything in her personal log. The musical communication, the mirrored behavior, the obvious intelligence behind those alien eyes. She was building a case that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about void stalkers. But she was also doing something more dangerous than she realized. She was forming a bond with the deadliest creature in known space. And somewhere, in the back of her mind, she was beginning to think of Specimen X7 not as a monster, but as a friend. The creature, for its part, had made a decision too. This small human with the gentle voice and fearless heart was not like the others. She was special. She was pack, and a void stalker would do anything to protect its pack. Katie had been working with the creature for 2 weeks when she made her biggest discovery. She had started bringing a small light panel to their sessions, flashing different colors and patterns while she hummed. The creature watched with great interest and soon began responding by making its own eyes glow in matching patterns. But today was different. Katie had accidentally cut her hand on a sharp edge while setting up her equipment. A few drops of blood fell on the floor near the barrier. She expected the creature to become excited by the scent, maybe even aggressive like the reports had warned. Instead, the creature did something that shocked her. It moved to the spot directly across from her injury and began making soft, concerned sounds. Its eyes stopped glowing purple and shifted to a gentle blue color Katie had never seen before. The creature pressed both hands against the barrier and made a low humming sound that felt almost like comfort. "You are worried about me," Katie whispered in amazement. The creature tilted its massive head and made a questioning sound. Katie showed her injured hand to the creature. Immediately, it began making urgent noises and gesturing toward the medical station across the room. It was trying to tell her to treat her wound. "I am okay," Katie said, pulling out a bandage from her kit. "See? Just a small cut." The creature watched carefully as she cleaned and bandaged the injury. Only when she was finished did it relax and return to its normal purple glow. But it kept looking at her hand, as if checking to make sure she was truly unhurt. That evening, Katie stayed late to update her research notes. She was alone in the lab when the station's emergency alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed and the computer announced a level 4 emergency in the engineering section. Through the intercom, Katie could hear Chief Engineer Thornak shouting orders. "Gravity generator failure in Section C. We have 3 crew members trapped under debris. I need all emergency teams to level 2 immediately." Katie knew she should evacuate to the emergency stations like everyone else. But something made her look back at the containment cell. The creature was pressed against the barrier, its eyes blazing with agitation. It was making urgent sounds and pointing toward the door. "You know something is wrong, don't you?" Katie said. The creature nodded. Katie was certain it nodded. An idea formed in her mind. A crazy, dangerous idea that could get her thrown off the station or worse. But she remembered the way the creature had shown concern for her injury. She remembered how it had tried to help her treat her wound. Katie walked to the containment controls. Her hands shook as she entered her access codes. The creature watched her every move, its eyes shifting from purple to that gentle blue color again. "I am going to trust you," Katie said. "But I need you to trust me too. There are people hurt on this station, people who need help. Can you help them?" The creature made a soft sound and placed one hand over where its heart might be. Then it pointed at Katie and made the same gesture. The meaning was clear. It would help because she asked. Katie took a deep breath and disabled the containment field. The energy barriers flickered and died. For the first time in months, nothing stood between Katie and the deadliest predator in known space except a few feet of air. The creature could have killed her in seconds. Instead, it stepped carefully out of its cell and knelt down beside her. Up close, it was even more impressive. Its armor was not just black, but seemed to contain tiny stars, like looking into deep space. Its multiple eyes studied her face with gentle intelligence. Katie reached out slowly and touched the creature's arm. The armor was warm and smooth, almost alive. The creature made a pleased sound and carefully touched her shoulder in return. Its claws, which could tear through steel, barely made contact with her skin. "We need to help the trapped crew," Katie said. The creature stood and gestured for her to lead the way. Together they ran through the corridors toward the emergency. Katie had never moved so fast in her life, but the creature easily kept pace beside her, its powerful legs covering ground with fluid grace. They reached the damaged section to find chaos. A massive support beam had fallen across a corridor, trapping 3 crew members underneath. Chief Engineer Thornak and a team of rescue workers were trying to lift the beam with emergency equipment, but it was too heavy. "Katie, Commander," Veltar shouted when he saw her. "What are you doing here? This area is—" His voice died as he noticed her companion. The entire rescue team froze. Some reached for weapons. Others backed away in terror. The creature they had all heard stories about stood calmly beside the human rookie, waiting for instructions. "He can help," Katie said firmly. "He wants to help." "That thing is a killer," one of the rescue workers shouted. The creature made a low, hurt sound. Katie could see the pain in its glowing eyes. It had heard these words before. "No," Katie said loudly. "He is not a killer. He is my friend." She walked over to the trapped crew members. One of them was Dr. Crixon, his bark-like skin crushed under the heavy beam. He was barely conscious, but his eyes widened when he saw the creature approaching. Katie knelt beside him. "We are going to get you out, but I need you to stay calm and not be afraid." She looked up at the creature and pointed at the beam. "Can you lift this?" The creature studied the situation for a moment. Then it positioned itself carefully at the center of the beam and wrapped its 6 arms around it. With a sound like controlled thunder, it lifted the massive piece of metal as if it weighed nothing. The rescue team stared in amazement as the creature held the beam steady while they pulled the injured crew members to safety. When everyone was clear, the creature carefully set the beam down away from the corridor. Dr. Crixon looked up at the creature that had just saved his life. His leaves rustled weakly as he spoke. "Thank you." The creature made a gentle sound and touched the injured scientist's arm with one claw so softly it was like a whisper. Then it looked at Katie with obvious pride. "Good job," Katie told her friend. The creature's eyes brightened with pleasure at the praise. Over the next hour, the creature helped clear debris, locate missing crew members with its enhanced senses, and even provided light in dark areas by making its eyes glow brighter. It worked alongside the rescue teams with perfect cooperation, following Katie's guidance and showing remarkable intelligence. When the emergency was over, Commander Veltar approached Katie and the creature. The proud Zephyrian looked deeply troubled. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "If this creature is truly intelligent, if it can choose to help instead of harm, then maybe we have been wrong about Void Stalkers all along," Katie finished. The creature seemed to understand they were talking about it. It moved closer to Katie and made a protective gesture, placing itself between her and the commander. Not threatening, but clearly showing where its loyalty lay. Katie reached up and touched the creature's arm. "It is okay. He is not going to hurt me." The creature relaxed but stayed close to her side. "What do you call it?" Commander Veltar asked. Katie smiled. "I call him Shadow, because he follows me everywhere now." Shadow made a pleased sound at hearing his name. He had been Specimen X7 for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to be more than just a number. As they walked back through the station corridors, crew members stopped to stare. Word was already spreading about the deadly predator that had become a hero. Some looked frightened, others amazed, but all of them were beginning to see Shadow differently. Katie knew their lives had changed forever. She was no longer just a rookie xenobiologist, and Shadow was no longer just a monster in a cage. They were partners now, bound together by trust and friendship, but she also knew their real challenges were just beginning. The galaxy had spent centuries fearing creatures like Shadow. Changing that kind of deep-seated belief would take more than one rescue mission. Still, As they walked side by side through the station, Katie felt hopeful. If one human and one void stalker could become friends, maybe anything was possible. News of Katie and Shadow's partnership spread through the galaxy, faster than light-speed communications. Within days, Nexus Station was flooded with requests from researchers, journalists, and military officials who wanted to study the impossible bond between human and void stalker. Katie found herself giving the same presentation over and over again to groups of amazed alien scientists. Shadow would sit beside her during these meetings, calm and alert, demonstrating the intelligence that everyone had missed. He could solve puzzles, respond to complex commands, and even seemed to understand basic mathematics when Katie drew numbers. In the air, Dr. Crixon had become their biggest supporter. The Helix scientist whose life Shadow had saved during the emergency spent hours studying their interaction patterns. His bark-like skin would rustle with excitement as he took notes on their communication methods. Remarkable, Dr. Crixon would say daily. The creature shows problem-solving abilities that exceed most sapient species. How did we miss this for so long? But Katie knew the answer. Fear had blinded everyone to what was really there. When you expected a monster, that was all you could see. Shadow had settled into life on the station with surprising ease. He spent his days with Katie in the research labs, but his nights patrolling the corridors. The crew had grown used to seeing his massive form moving silently through the station, checking on sleeping quarters and investigating unusual sounds. At first, this had terrified everyone, but they quickly realized that Shadow was not hunting. He was protecting. When a small fire broke out in the kitchen late one night, Shadow was the first to respond, alerting the crew and helping to contain the damage before it could spread. He treats the whole station like his territory, Security Chief Yulvan observed, but not in a predatory way, more like a guardian watching over his family. Katie smiled at that. It was exactly what Shadow was doing. Somehow, her bond with the creature had extended to include everyone on Nexus Station. They were all part of his pack now. The real test came 3 weeks after the rescue mission. Katie was in her quarters reviewing research data when the station's emergency systems activated again. But this time, the threat was not internal. All hands to emergency stations, Commander Veltar's voice echoed through the intercom. We have received a distress call from Colony 7. They are under attack by raiders. The nearest military vessel is 4 days away. Katie ran to the command center, Shadow close behind her. The main screen showed Colony 7, a small research outpost on the edge of the system. Even from this distance, they could see explosions and fires across the colony's surface. 73 civilians, Chief Engineer Thornak reported grimly, including 22 children. The raiders have disabled their defense grid and are demanding surrender. What can we do? Katie asked. This is a research station, not a warship. Commander Veltar's forearms moved in a gesture of helplessness. We have one shuttle and basic defensive weapons. Against a full raider squadron, we would be destroyed before we could help anyone. Katie looked at Shadow. The creature was studying the tactical display with obvious intelligence, his multiple eyes tracking the raider ship movements. He made a questioning sound and pointed at the screen. You want to help them, Katie realized. Shadow nodded and made an urgent sound. Then he did something that amazed everyone in the room. He moved to the tactical display and began pointing at specific locations on the colony surface, making different sounds for each spot. What is he doing? Commander Veltar asked. Katie watched Shadow's movements carefully. She had learned to read his body language over the past weeks. I think he is showing us weak points in the raider formation, places where a small force could do the most damage. Dr. Crixon moved closer to study Shadow's analysis. If he is correct, an infiltration team could disable their primary ship from the inside while they are focused on the colony. That would require someone to get aboard their vessel undetected, Security Chief Yulvan pointed out, and then survive long enough to sabotage their systems. Everyone looked at Shadow. The creature stood 8 feet tall, with natural stealth, abilities and strength that could tear through ship hulls, but he had never been tested in actual combat. It is too dangerous, Commander Veltar said firmly. We cannot risk losing our only success story with Voidstalker research. Katie felt anger rise in her chest. You mean you cannot risk losing your prize exhibit? That is not what I meant, Veltar replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. Shadow made a low sound and moved to stand beside Katie. He understood enough of the conversation to know they were talking about him. His eyes began to glow brighter as he looked at the images of the burning colony. He wants to go, Katie said quietly. Those people need help, and he knows he can provide it. And what about you? Dr. Crixon asked. Voidstalkers bond with their pack. He will not go without you. Katie felt her stomach drop. The scientist was right. Shadow had never left her side for more than a few minutes since their bond formed. If he went on this mission, she would have to go too. The thought terrified her. She was a researcher, not a soldier. She had never been in combat, never used a weapon in anger. But when she looked at Shadow, she saw complete trust in his glowing eyes. He believed in her, even if she did not believe in herself. I will go with him, Katie said, her voice stronger than she felt. Absolutely not, Commander Veltar replied immediately. I will not send an inexperienced human and an untested creature into a combat situation. Then those people will die, Katie shot back, and their deaths will be on your conscience, not mine. Shadow made a sound that everyone recognized as agreement. He moved to the tactical display again and began showing them a detailed plan. How they could approach the raider ship undetected, where they could enter without triggering alarms, which systems to target for maximum effect. The plan was brilliant. It was also extremely dangerous. Even if you succeed in disabling their ship, Yulvin pointed out, how do you escape? Once they realize what has happened, they will hunt you down. Shadow made a different sound, one Katie had never heard before. It was deep and threatening, full of promise and menace. For the first time, since leaving his cage, Shadow sounded like the predator everyone feared. He says let them try, Katie translated, though she was not sure how she knew what the sound meant. Commander Veltar studied the tactical display for a long moment. Finally, he made a decision that would change everything. Prepare the shuttle, he ordered. But this mission is completely unofficial. If you are captured, Nexus Station cannot help you. Katie nodded. She had expected as much. As the crew prepared their shuttle for departure, Katie felt fear and excitement warring in her chest. This would be her first real test as Shadow's partner. Everything they had built together, all the trust and communication, and friendship would be put to the ultimate challenge. Shadow seemed to sense her nervousness. He moved close to her and made the gentle humming sound that had become their private signal for comfort. His massive hand touched her shoulder with surprising gentleness. We can do this, Katie told him, as much to convince herself as to reassure her partner. Shadow's eyes brightened with confidence. In his alien way, he was telling her the same thing. 1 hour later, their shuttle launched from Nexus Station on a trajectory that would take them to Colony 7. Katie piloted while Shadow studied the raider ship schematics on their portable display. Neither of them spoke much during the journey, but the silence was comfortable. They were partners now, heading into danger together. Katie had started as a rookie researcher trying to understand a monster. Now she was a warrior flying alongside her best friend to save innocent lives. The transformation was complete. All that remained was to prove they could succeed when everything was on the line. The raider ship hung in space like a metal beast, its weapons pointed down at the burning colony below. Katie piloted their small shuttle on a silent approach, using the planet's magnetic field to hide their energy signature. Shadow crouched beside her, his multiple eyes studying the enemy vessel through the viewport. There, Shadow whispered, pointing with one clawed finger at a maintenance hatch near the ship's rear section. His voice was barely audible, but Katie had learned to understand his quiet communications. Katie nodded and adjusted their approach. The shuttle drifted closer to the raider ship, moving like a piece of space debris. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Everything depended on the next few minutes. The maintenance hatch was exactly where Shadow had predicted. Katie brought their shuttle alongside it and activated the docking clamps. The connection was silent, undetected by the raider ship's sensors. Shadow moved to the airlock and began the careful process of cutting through the outer hull. His claws, which could slice through steel like paper, made quick work of the metal plating. Within minutes, they had created an opening large enough for both of them to pass through. The interior of the raider ship was dark and cramped. Emergency. Lighting cast red shadows on the metal walls, and the air smelled of oil and unwashed bodies. Katie activated her portable scanner and pointed toward the engine room. Shadow nodded and began moving through the corridors with impossible silence. Katie had seen Shadow move quietly before, but this was different. He seemed to flow through the darkness like liquid shadow, his massive form becoming nearly invisible. His natural hunting instincts, dormant for so long in captivity, had awakened. They reached the engine room without encountering any guards. The massive power core hummed in the center of the space, surrounded by control panels and monitoring equipment. Shadow immediately went to work, his intelligence allowing him to understand the ship's systems, despite never having seen this particular design before. Katie kept watch at the door while Shadow systematically disabled key components. He was careful not to cause explosions or alarms, instead creating failures that would look like normal mechanical problems. The raiders would not realize their ship was crippled until they tried to leave. Engine room secure, Katie whispered into her communicator. They had agreed to maintain radio silence unless absolutely necessary, but she needed to update their timeline. Shadow finished his work and moved to join her at the door. His eyes were bright with satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2 would be much more dangerous. They needed to reach the ship's detention area and free any prisoners the raiders might have taken from the colony. Shadow had detected life signs in that section during their approach. They moved deeper into the ship, following maintenance passages that kept them away from the main corridors. Katie's scanner showed 3 heat signatures in the detention area, along with 2 guards. Shadow made a questioning sound and held up 2 claws. Katie understood. He was asking if she wanted him to eliminate the guards permanently. "No killing unless we have no choice," Katie whispered back. Shadow nodded, though she could see disappointment in his glowing eyes. His predator instincts wanted to protect his pack by removing threats completely. But he trusted Katie's judgment. They reached the detention area through a ventilation shaft. Katie could see through the grating into a small room where 3 colonists sat in energy cages. 2 raider guards stood nearby, armed with pulse rifles and looking bored. Shadow positioned himself above one guard while Katie moved to take the other. They had practiced this kind of coordination during their time on the station, though never in a real combat situation. Katie dropped through the ceiling vent and landed behind her target. Before the guard could react, she pressed her stun weapon against his neck and activated it. The raider collapsed without making a sound. Shadow's takedown was even more impressive. He flowed through the ventilation system like smoke and appeared behind his target in complete silence. One massive hand covered the guard's mouth while the other applied pressure to his neck. The raider went limp in Shadow's arms. "Are you hurt?" Katie asked the prisoners as she deactivated their energy cages. "We are fine," replied an elderly human woman. "But there are more of us in the mining section. The raiders separated us into groups." Katie felt her heart sink. Their plan had accounted for one detention area, not multiple prisoner locations. But before she could respond, Shadow made an urgent sound and pointed toward the corridor. Footsteps were approaching, heavy boots on metal decking getting closer. Shadow moved to the doorway and peered around the corner. His body language told Katie everything she needed to know. They were about to have company, and it was not friendly. "Hide," Katie whispered, to the freed prisoners, pointing to an alcove behind some storage containers. Shadow took position on one side of the doorway, while Katie crouched on the other. When the first raider entered the room, he found himself facing 8 feet of very angry Voidstalker. The raider's scream was cut short as Shadow's hand clamped over his mouth. But the damage was done. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and Katie could hear more footsteps running toward their location. "So much for stealth," Katie muttered. Shadow made a sound that might have been laughter, then moved to block the doorway. His posture had changed completely. Gone was the careful, controlled movement of their infiltration. Now he stood like what he truly was, the apex predator of his species. The next group of raiders to enter the detention area learned why void stalkers were feared throughout the galaxy. Shadow moved with deadly precision, his 6 arms working in perfect coordination. He disarmed opponents faster than they could react, sending pulse rifles flying across the room. When the raiders tried to retreat, they found their escape route, blocked by an unstoppable force. But Shadow remembered Katie's instructions. He did not kill, though Katie could see the effort it cost him to hold back. Instead, he left a room full of unconscious raiders and one very clear message: do not threaten his pack. We need to move, Katie said urgently. They know we are here. Now. Shadow nodded and gestured toward the corridor. Katie followed him as they began fighting their way toward the mining section. What had started as a stealth mission had become a running battle through the enemy ship. They found the remaining prisoners in a large cargo hold, guarded by 6 heavily armed raiders. This time, there was no possibility of a quiet approach. The raiders were alert and ready for trouble. Shadow looked at Katie and made a questioning sound. She understood what he was asking. Could he do what came naturally? Could he finally stop holding back? Katie looked at the frightened prisoners, then at the armed guards who showed no mercy. She thought about the burning colony below and the innocent people who needed their help. Do what you have to do, she told Shadow. What happened next would become legend throughout the galaxy. Shadow moved like a force of nature, unstoppable and terrifying. The raiders' weapons could not track him as he flowed between shadows and struck from impossible angles. In less than 2 minutes, 6 armed guards were defeated by 1 void stalker, who had finally remembered what he was born to be. When the battle was over, Shadow stood among the fallen raiders, breathing heavily but uninjured. His eyes had gone from purple to a deep red that Katie had never seen before. This was the color of a void stalker in full combat mode. But when he looked at Katie, the red faded back to gentle purple. He was still her friend, still her partner. The predator and the protector existed in the same being. They freed the remaining prisoners and began moving toward their shuttle. Behind them, the raider ship was falling apart as Shadow's sabotage took effect. Power systems failed, artificial gravity fluctuated, and emergency systems activated throughout the vessel. By the time they reached their escape route, the raider ship was dead in space. Katie piloted their shuttle away from the crippled vessel, while Shadow helped tend to the rescued prisoners. Below them, Colony 7 was no longer burning. Without their ship's support, the remaining raiders on the surface had surrendered to the Colonial Defense Forces. The mission was a complete success. 73 lives saved, a raider crew captured, and proof that the impossible partnership between human and void stalker could work under the most extreme conditions. When they returned to Nexus Station, Katie and Shadow found themselves celebrities. The story of their rescue mission spread through the galaxy faster than their shuttle could travel. Requests for interviews, research partnerships, and military consultations flooded the station's communication systems. But more importantly, other researchers began reporting success with their own impossible creatures. Shadow had proved that the deadliest predators in space could become protectors when treated with understanding, instead of fear. Katie was promoted to Chief of Interspecies Relations, a position created specifically for her unique skills. Shadow became the first non-sentient being to receive a Galactic Council Medal of Honor. As Katie sat in her new office watching Shadow play with a puzzle designed for advanced AI systems, she smiled at how far they had come. A rookie human and a caged monster had become partners, friends, and heroes. The galaxy was full of creatures labeled as monsters, waiting in cages for someone brave enough to see past the fear. Katie and Shadow had shown that with patience,